was asked is, why do so many churches have different opinions about 1 Corinthians 11, 27 to 29 regarding communion? And so let's open up there, if you would. And 1 Corinthians 11, you'll find it on page 1130, 39. And so if you look at verses 27, verse 27 to 29, who therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body and drinks the body, eats and drinks judgment on himself. So the question is actually, why are there so many different? And it's, this is, it's always this could be taken as antagonistic, but there really aren't that many different opinions. There are only three. And the three opinions are these. At least specifically about the bread, wine, body, blood. And if you have other questions relating, but the three opinions have been, frankly, are, if you will, relatively new by distinction. Up until the 1500s, this was not debated. When you look in the early church fathers, there is no example, and if you can find one, I'd love to hear it. The early church fathers that would give you the sense that this was symbolism. So therefore, it wasn't until the 1500s till the Protestant movement, and it's a much bigger conversation than we have time to get into. But in essence, the three positions are this. And incidentally, two of the three are pretty darn close. The positions are that it's bread, wine, and it symbolizes body, blood. Just like a flag for a country symbolizes the country. It's not the country, it symbolizes the country. So when you see the stars and stripes, it's not the United States of America, it just symbolizes the country. Okay, do we understand that position? That position is from a historical perspective, and we don't have time to get into it now, but that would be a movement that came about in the Protestant movement of in the 1500s. So the second position would be the Roman Catholic position. And I want to be careful before I say the Orthodox position, because the Eastern Church, I haven't spent time with it recently. But the Roman Catholic position, it's called transubstantiation. And the Catholic position is that bread and wine changes into body and blood. So therefore, it is no longer bread and wine, it is body and blood. If you've been to a Catholic church, actually in the liturgy, it is signified by a certain thing. Does anybody know what it is? So next time you go to the Catholic church and they're having the Mass, listen for the bell ring. If you hear the bell ring, right after the consecration of the elements, then that will tell you it's no longer bread and it's no longer wine. Okay? It's called transubstantiation. The third position is the position that was still the primary position. As I said, John Calvin, Luther, most of the reformers would have held to this position. So if you have background, a lot of Dutch Reformed, all of this, they would be very, very, very close in how they use the language, Presbyterians. And that would be that it is bread, body, wine, blood, simultaneously. It is not just bread, and it's not just body. That position is the historical position. However, Luther would tell you, if Luther were in this conversation, he would say, I can accept transubstantiation. He would say, you know, if you want to use that concept of it's no longer bread, it's the body, it's no longer wine. But what's critical is to understand that we are partaking of the body and blood of Christ. And Luther would say, and this is where it gets to the question of symbolism. So if you go with me at verse 27. Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner. So believe it or not, the Greek language is a lot like math. And if you're familiar with math equations, what's on one side of the equal sign has to be the same as on the other side, right? Now you have associative, you have all these different ways, you know, 3 plus 2 equals 5, or 3 plus 2 equals 2 plus 5, or 2 plus 3, or 3 plus 2 equals 4 plus 1, but they're the same, right? You say, well, that makes sense. Well, actually, the Greek language is very mathematical. And so I want to show you what Luther argued with Ulrich Zwingli, and there's no debating it. So watch what this does here in verse 27. Whoever eats the bread, and drinks the cup, bread, cup. You see it there? In an unworthy manner, is guilty concerning, you've now moved across the equal sign to the what? Body and blood. It is absolutely irrefutable that Paul was showing bread equals body, cup equals blood. You can't debate it. And we know historically that it was understood that way because the early Christians were accused of and put to death for what? Cannibalism. See, we think about those Romans as being those bad people. They actually were the decent people. It's the Christians who were the scourge of society, involved in all kinds of inappropriate behaviors like cannibalism and sexual promiscuity. I mean, my goodness. They got together and had sexual orgies. And that was the translation of the kiss of peace. Which, by the way, did take place. And it would offend you, it offends me, it scares me to death. But if I had something against John, I don't even think I can do it, because sorry, dude, I'm just not up to that today. But if I had something with John during the worship service, the service would stop. It was called the dismissal. Those that were not catechized would leave. So only the Christians that were gone through the catechesis, the training, would be there left. And what did they do next? They had confession and absolution. And so I would go up to John and I'd say, hey, John, I've been really thinking these things about you, and I've actually probably told a few people, please forgive me. And John would say, I would say, I've sinned against God and you. And John, you would say, I forgive you. And then, I'm not going to do it on the lips, dude. The kiss of peace would happen. But it was lip to lip. Now, some of us grew up in churches where they had the sharing of the peace. I bet it wasn't that way. The sharing of the peace was, hey, the peace of the Lord be with you, and also with you. Now, so my whole point is that this, we know both from a biblical and a historical construct that it's bread is wine, bread is body, wine is blood. This is why you are sinning against the body and blood of Christ, and we go on from there. So there are only 3 positions. 2 of the positions are pretty darn close. Transubstantiation and what the Lutheran confession is. You say, but what about this argument for symbolism? Well, the argument for symbolism is actually part of a bigger conversation. And I would suggest to you, and again, I'm not trying to be argumentative because I am so grateful.
Okay, ladies, there'll be a 2-minute warning and then we're going to start our meeting. So please find your seats.
The evangelical movement in this country has also created all kinds of crazy things like nationalism that has created, said Christianity and the United States go together equally, and that is not true.
If anybody hasn't got the raffle ticket from Sally, please make sure you go over and get it now before we start.
Harmful to the witness of Christ, like rationalism and individualism. And I could go on and on. We do not have time in here today to get into this today. So when people talk to me about why would we feel the need, there are plenty. I've had this said to me over and over. Why would we feel the need to do ministry over on the mainland? There's plenty of churches over there. Well, that argument is actually poor on 2 fronts. First of all, there are not enough churches over there for the amount of people that are coming into this place. Second of all, I'll just say it straight.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming today. This is a really special day for us. We've got not 1, not 2, but 3 special things going on today. So glad you're here.
And frankly,
first of all, we want to welcome our scholarship winner, and we'll have an introduction to her.
Community Church would have no problem telling me, thank you, you cannot preach in my pulpit. Why do we feel so shy about saying, doggone it, close communion is appropriate. It is the body and blood of Christ. Why are we so nervous and frightened about planting a ministry over there that is Christian first, but it is a Lutheran Christian church? We don't have to be offensive and jerks, which, by the way, there are offensive jerks in every denomination. But it's a great question. And what I would tell you is these are intelligent scholars that hold to these positions, and it's not always easy. Like the word remembrance. The word remembrance, when we think of remembrance, we think of, do you remember when you used to be able to ski, didn't you do black diamonds? You did ski. Do you remember that? We think of the word remember as something in the past. If you were talking to a Hebrew, he would tell you straight up, that is not the word remembrance. The word remembrance is actually, and I wish we had that turned off, because this is going to be a little bit, I will put it in very polite terms. Do you know every time a man and a woman have intercourse together, within the framework of marriage, wedlock, they are actually living out Genesis chapter 2. A man shall leave his mother and mother, father, and join with his wife, and the 2 shall be one. They are remembering. They are consummating. They are living out the first time. And maybe the first time happened before you got married, then you would have been a good city Jew. Or maybe it happened on the night you were married, you would have been a Nazareth Jew, a country Jew. Or maybe it happened a few nights later, and then you would have been just a crazy Jew. But the fact of the matter is, every time you had intercourse, you are remembering. That is the word. Unfortunately, most of us aren't going to stand up front as clergy and say, the word remember is more than you just kind of fondly thinking back to Jesus died for your sins. It's participating and receiving. That's why the Catholic Church, by the way, Luther said they went too far. They actually call it a new sacrifice. Why do you think they say that? That every time they celebrate Mass, it's a new sacrifice. Because at least they got this part right. Remembering is more than just fanciful looking back. It's participating. So these are challenging, and this gets into conversations that get much if you will, out of your pay grade. But this is where you have pastors who are trained. And so you sit, and I sit with the guy, Pastor Jeff over at Low Country, and we talk through it, and we respect each other. We say, yeah, that's a good argument. Yeah, have you thought about this? And we wrestle through it. But oftentimes, quite candidly, we can have the conversation much easier if you all are not around. Because when the lay people are around, it becomes no longer about wrestling with the word. It becomes with impressing people. You know, our church is bigger than your church. Or, hey, you know what? We're doing better mission work than you're doing. Yeah, Sharon. Yeah, so when we take communion, Christ is coming to us and feeding us. Yeah, we are one, right? Yeah. Well, right. Well, actually, if you were a Baptist, they would never say you are one with Christ. They would tell you that you're remembering something Jesus did for you. So just like they would not say baptism is becoming one with Christ. They would say baptism is about a pledge of allegiance to Christ. See, there's a common thread here, and it's a common theme that we don't talk about very much because we don't want to offend everybody. But the fact of the matter, within much of evangelicalism, the focus is on the people. I remember Jesus died for my sins. I pledged my faithfulness to Jesus when I was baptized. I was born again, and this is when I chose Christ. Do you hear the common word there? I. And I'm just going to tell you, again, I struggle, like all of us do, with trying to be faithful to the Scriptures. But I would tell you that the Scriptures are not as much about us as they are about God. And this is where it gets problematic. Because what God does doesn't seem to always make sense. And it's okay for us to wrestle with it. Does someone else? Yes, Mary.
Well, it seems like we have a lot of emphasis on whether it is the body or the blood or whatever. Not so much emphasis on verse 27, where it says, or 28, let a person examine himself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, sometimes I feel like I'm just walking up there because everybody else is walking up there.
Yeah. By the way, that's again, we're past our time, and we're really supposed to be talking about the languages. But Mary, why do you think we started holding these up and pausing? And by the way, I will tip my hat to the evangelicals. I've gone to some non-denoms that do a better job of getting people prepared to take communion than in the rote, yes, I will say it, rote, mechanical service that oftentimes goes on in Lutheran or Episcopal or Catholic churches where you just go through the motions. This is why we give people a chance to say, hey, no matter who you are, everybody should take time and ask these questions. Everybody should reflect upon and prepare. Absolutely. And obviously at our church, we allow people to make that decision. I don't police the table, but I do stand here to help shepherd the table. Why do you think I stand here? The first person who they greet when they come to this table is the person who knows every person in this church by name. Now, there will come a time when I won't. But it's because I care. I don't want somebody to take communion to their condemnation. And so I'm going to pause and say, have you been prepared? Are you ready today to take communion? I will ask. I do it all the time. And by the way, it doesn't happen often, very infrequently, but there have been times when I've said to somebody, hey, I'll pray over you and I'll talk with you later. But it does, we want the people to have be prepared as best they can to examine themselves. So we're at that time where we got to call it. But next week, we're going to come back together. and dig back into the scriptures. Again, my hope is that we can continue. I want us to continue to grow in our understanding how to study the scriptures. I will probably start next week with teaching on parables, because again, parables are a perfect example where scholars of different theological persuasions will come at them differently. And I'll show you next week a perfect example of a parable where someone says, oh, this is about Christians. Oh no, this is about Jesus. So let's close in the family prayer, shall we? Lord, remember us in your kingdom and teach us to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So I need to spend just a few minutes with the facilitators. Greg, I don't know if you'd be, oh, you got to facilitate, that's right. I don't know, Garrett, have you done this before? Just maybe somebody can help you take this and put it into the room